But the reality is, I can't do what I do. We can't do what we do in the places that we do it without the faithful generosity of those who invest and give of their financial resources for us to be here.
Buongiorno. You're listening to Going, Where God is at Work, a podcast that sits at the intersection of missions, theory, and practice. We're walking out our call to ministry in faraway places and happy to have you join us on the journey. I'm your host, Jesse Pauli, a missions leader serving in Rome, and I'm here with Alessandro Di Leonardo, church planter in Cisterna di Latina, and Jen Williamson, our missiologist who lives and works in Lyon. How's everyone doing today?
I'm doing great.
Yep, doing good.
Yes, that sounded so convincing, Alessandro. I'm doing great.
Well, I stopped drinking coffee, and so it's interesting. I'm in one way want to go back because I just love the idea of drinking coffee, but I feel great without it. So I'm like wrestling with what should I do? But I know I feel great without it.
That is
Wow.
My wife and I are experimenting with a restrictive diet. I'll just leave it at that. And you start to realize just how much food plays a part in like your routine, your habits, your socializing.
Totally. Yep. I went gluten-free a couple of years ago and I feel great. So great that I don't even miss it. But it's funny how, especially in France where bread is such a staple, everyone else feels uncomfortable when I can't eat bread and they get all apologetic and everything. And I'm like, it's okay. I want you to enjoy it. I know it's delicious. But it is like feasting such a part of our socializing and our culture that, yeah, what you eat and how you eat or drink with coffee or when you drink, it has rippling effects.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad you said the thing about bread because at first I thought, man, am I stereotyping? But when we were in Lille for one of our trainings, we saw like every afternoon people would go by and they had their baguette sticking out of their bag.
Yep.
To go home and have dinner
sure.
and have a fresh baguette. And I was just like, wow, that is a thing that the French do. So you just kind of confirmed that for us.
Absolutely.
Well, we are here today to have a special episode, kind of interrupt our series, our mini series. We've done the one on evangelism and one on discipleship. If you haven't had a chance to check those out, please go back and listen to those. But today we thought it would be opportune to talk about Thanksgiving. I think it's something like about 50% of our listenership is coming from the States or from that background. And we know how important Thanksgiving is this time of year in America and a national holiday. And we're not here to talk about the national holiday per se and the history behind it, but more just to talk about this idea of, thankfulness and gratitude in what we are thankful for, but also what does the scripture has to say about that, and how does that play out in missions? How can we leverage it? So I think based off of just our short intro here, Alessandro would be grateful for coffee, right? Is there anything else that you might be grateful for?
For something hot. Here in Italy, they have this thing called orzo, and so it kind of is fake coffee, but
what is or it's a root, right? Is it?
I don't know, to be honest. I just know that it's
I
sold.
wonder if it's like chicory. Some French people still drink chicory.
Really? Oh man.
Yeah, but not to sound older, but yeah, thankful for health. Just realizing how really in the mission field, your health is a big deal. I remember my first mission trip was when I was in college. It was a short-term mission trip. I just became a believer, and I was going to Cambodia, and I just became a Christian, so everything was new to me. But I've done sports. I've never cared like about my body in the sense of like protecting it. It's just you go all out. And I remember like a week or two before going to the mission trip, I just started having these thoughts. What if I break my leg? What if this happens? Then I can't go. And so I started getting these ideas, not panic attacks, but this idea awareness that, oh man, I gotta protect this body before I can't go to the mission trip. And so it just made me realize the first time how important my body was for the mission trip.
Mm, mm.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
it's totally true. And I think with health, there's in some ways we're stewards of our bodies, and that's partly our responsibility to make sure we care for them. But there is so much that is outside of our control. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where I agree with you. Just deep gratitude for God waking me up today and giving me the breath of life and the capacity to speak or to minister in whatever way he's given me to minister, because the Christian life is an embodied life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's no small thing. Yeah. I'm thankful for um, the body of Christ, for relationships,
Mm.
for support. We we have, we were changing churches. The church that we helped to plant 9 years ago has closed down, and it was not a tragic thing. It was just a normal life cycle. It was appropriate and it was time. And so um, I've had to plug into find a new church. And as we've done that, there's something so fabulous about walking into a new community and yet knowing you share the same faith
Mm.
and the same attachment to Jesus Christ, and um, which means many of your life goals and values are the same. And even when just getting to know people, you have this foundation on which to build. And as I have a husband who deploys because of his work and is gone for 2 months at a time, those relationships are even more key to me,
Mm.
because I need to be attached and in community, and having spaces where I can walk out my faith and experience the body of Christ. And I've just been so keenly aware of how important that is to my life, and how thankful I am that God has invited us to be a part of his community and to live in that way.
Mm.
And I think wherever we are in the world as ministers, sometimes, church becomes our ministry, and then very connected to our work. But I think as someone who's been in professional ministry for so many years, I'm keenly aware that I need to be in spaces where I am a receiver,
Mm.
where I'm sitting in the seat of a learner, where I am, I think of Jesus washing Peter's feet and Peter being like, "You can't wash my feet." And I think all of us as ministers need to learn to sit in a place where our feet are being washed. We're not
Mm.
always the ones washing feet. Sometimes we're the ones who need to have our feet washed. And so I'm just really, really grateful. And grateful also for this. The pastor said to us the first week, he's like, knowing we were missionaries, he's like, "Hey, if you want to roll up your sleeves and, and plug in and have a place to do ministry, we have a place for you. But if you just need a place to sit back and be quiet and receive for a while, we have a place for you." And I
That's
thought that was
awesome.
so great, because that's where I need to be right now. Just for a while, I just need to go and to sit and to be ministered to.
That's great.
Yeah, I think yeah, we're going through something similar, I think that's important thing to recognize when we do need those times and those periods. And um yeah, you kind of stole the thing I was going to say, Jen, cuz I think that's
You
what's
can say the
been
same thing.
yeah, it's just been what I've been thankful for, is just community. And I think sometimes you kind of realize when you're hurting what you're thankful for, in a sense. And like the fact that like around us we don't have family to come around and help us with raising our kids or those kind of things. Just the more community, and building community outside of your blood family is so hard. It takes a lot of intentionality, a lot of trust building and all that kind of stuff. And so to see now, 5 years in, where we can kind of point and say, okay, those are some people that we really trust. Those are people, and recently Monica and I were just talking about, like, hey, if we needed to go on a trip or something and we wanted to leave our kids, like who are some people that we feel like we could trust our kids with them? And we actually had names. And so it was like, wow, this is a good thing, a good feeling. You don't feel as alone and so yeah, I think I would say that that's been something that I've been really thankful for is community and to be able to be a community to other people too. Like um, not just the receiving the blessing of people being a good friend to us, but then also being able to bless people with being a good friend and seeing them encouraged
Mhm.
and uplifted by our presence or our encouragement to them is it's not something to take for granted.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to be a copycat because I don't want to be left out. Um, I'm also thankful for relationships, but I think as a pastor, sometimes it's difficult to make those deeper, meaningful relationships within the community that you're ministering to. And so I'm grateful for the friends and relationships I've made
Hmm.
um, outside the community I'm ministering into, and so blessed for that. It took a while, and it took a lot of trial and error, failures on my part, on other people's part, but I'm so thankful for where we are now. And it's so needed to have people with you on the ground, not necessarily your same agency teammates, but different, but doing the same work. And that's
Mhm.
so refreshing to have someone to talk to spend time with when things are going well, and especially when things are not going well.
Yeah. So true. And I think, like you were saying, as well, Jesse, being on the other side of that ministers to me as well. So, just for an example, there's a couple in our mission organization that David and I get on with very well, and they're younger than us and in a different season of life and have 4 young children. And early when they were first in France, they just had a couple of really, really rough years and they just needed to get away as a couple and regroup. And so David and I were able to go and watch their 4 kids for a week while they went away. And as much as it was a huge ministry to them, it was also great for us because one of the things we've left behind in the States is a whole bushel of nieces and nephews that we love. And there's a special relationship there with children in your life that aren't your children. And it was really meaningful for us to connect with those kids and to hang out with those kids. And then that family just came and visited me last week with all 4 kids. They hung out in Lyon for 2 days, and we went out to Goûter and we walked around and we played games with the kids. And the kids feel like they have relationship with
Wow.
me because we've invested that time in them. And so it becomes this mutually beneficial community. And like you were saying, Jesse, we have to kind of find our family on the mission field. And I especially appreciate the intergenerational opportunities. I mean, these people aren't young enough to be my children. This couple isn't young enough to be my children, but they are just, a season behind David and I in parenting and in all of those things. And it's a wonderful friendship.
What was the youngest child, Jen? How old was the
Oh,
youngest
okay.
child?
So well, right now she is 8, but when we took care of her, she was potty training. And I was telling her a story about how we took her to the beach and yeah, she pooped. And this was like, we had not been potty training for a lot of years. This was the fault of the caretakers, not the 2-year-old. When you're potty training, it wasn't her fault. I was like, it wasn't your fault, sweetie, but I did not prepare well for that moment as the caretaker, and it was quite a catastrophe. So, we've had that length of relationship with them. And yeah, even that to leave kids with us in the midst of potty training. I also went up once. The mom needed shoulder surgery, and so they were just going to need an extra pair of hands for a week of recovery. And so I've gone up and helped out in seasons like that too. And with David and I being empty nesters, we have some flexibility to do that. So
That's great.
yeah,
My wife and I always wanted to go to France. Now I know I can with my 2 kids.
for sure.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. So how can we transition to this idea of you know, we're talking about things that we're grateful for personally, but also like, how can we also cultivate gratitude towards um, ministry and missions, cross-cultural work in general? Things that those that have blazed the trail before us. Um, I would love to hear what your guys' thoughts are, but I also have a story to share in this light because I didn't realize that we were going to talk about this, but um, we just finished up our retreat that we do annually for our field, and I don't know why actually where it got started, or maybe I do. It was just because of a whole bureaucracy thing that I was trying to work on. But I started looking into the history of our organization here in Italy, and I was able to actually have a phone call with one of the first missionaries with our organization to Italy. He's in his 80s, and talked to him and his wife, and we had a phenomenal conversation. And then I was able to find a website where like one of the first leaders for our mission agency here in Italy had like his whole resume on this website. So I was able to like go back and look at like all his speaking engagements and all the things he did. And so as I was like looking through this stuff, it just started encouraging me. Like these guys, like they went through what I'm going through now, and they lasted, I think one of them 42 years, another one like 50 some years of ministry here in Italy. Um,
Wow.
and and so I just took it to our field retreat, and I was like, we're going to talk about this. Like no one knows this here. Everyone thinks like, and so we were reading these guys, their resumes and the stories they shared with me, and I could just see like the inspiration going in to everybody in the room. And you could just see people are like, okay, like yes, I'm in a hard season right now, but man, those guys did it for that long. And then we see the legacy, the Bible Institute still running here, and different churches are still going that were founded by these guys. And then I said to everyone, they were 20 in their 20s and 30s. And all of us were in our 20s and 30s. And so we were like, so that's what it means, And one guy told me, he's like, we came with no kids, newlyweds, and our kids are still there, and our grandkids are now going to churches there. And so it was just like, I just realized I am grateful so much for what those guys did. I never met them. I don't interact with the ministries that they had founded before, but I found a lot of encouragement, a lot of, inspiration to say like, hey, and so on the
Yeah.
last day, it was interesting. We were praying, and I don't know. I know this phrase gets used a lot for different places, but someone said, um, Italy is a graveyard to missions or whatever, and I know it gets used a lot. But so we
Mhm.
kind of the eight of us were in there singing worship songs on our last day, and we're like, God just said like, no longer a graveyard. Like we're no longer going to talk about it as a graveyard. Like it's And then one of the missionaries wrote a beautiful newsletter where she's talked about how like from graveyard to garden and how it's going to
Mm,
blossom and beautiful. And so it's just like, man, I'm grateful for the Royal Pecks and Bernie Oxenhams and these guys and Linda and their wives that went before us and blazed the trail, and
yeah.
now they're ministering to us even though like royals passed away and they're long gone. So
What a beautiful story. Wow, that's
Yeah.
encouraging to me to hear. I was gonna kind of talk about more on the idea, as Paul talks about in First Corinthians 3:6 and 9, about the idea that some plant, some water, but God makes grow. Just as a pastor here in Italy, for the most part, we get a lot of people who are not walking with the Lord. I've never made a decision to be with Him, and so we minister. We thankfully get to see a lot of people come to know Him and accept Him. But I love when I hear their full testimony, and it's like never ending. It's like, wait a minute, you have heard about Christ before. And it's just great to hear these stories about, yeah, one time I went to this thing, someone shared it to me. I mean, the one that sticks out to me now is there's a Chinese lady who attends our church. doesn't speak Italian, doesn't speak English, so we have no way of communicating. But we're trying everything. I always write out my sermons and translate them to Chinese and give it to her. There's a possibility that she has accepted the Lord. I'm getting some people who speak Chinese to help me confirm it. But she has heard about Jesus in China. Someone had shared the gospel to her. She didn't accept there. She didn't care for, but someone planted there. And just to me, so
Right.
beautiful how like we are never the first. There's always someone. And it's great to be part of that legacy of leading people to Christ. And it's a teamwork
Yeah.
effort, not just the church, small c, but capital C.
Full body effort. I love that, Alessandro. And along that line of the full body effort, when I think of gratitude this time of year as a missionary whose salary is paid by generous donations, I think of the deep gratitude I have for those who are called to give, those who invest in this work of God from afar, who put their confidence and trust that that God might be able to use someone like me to share His good news and to reflect His glory. It's overwhelming to think of that kind of trust in this broken vessel that I am, and the commitment that people give. You know, money represents really your lifeblood. I mean, we have to spend hours at work in order to earn something. And so they're giving their lives. But the reality is, I can't do what I do. We can't do what we do in the places that we do it without the faithful generosity of those who invest and give of their financial resources for us to be here. And on top of that, those who pray. That's another form of investment that I'm deeply grateful for. And I never take it for granted when someone says, "Hey, we're praying for you this week," or "Our church is praying for you today," or those sorts of things, because it's the lifeblood of what we do. And I'm deeply grateful.
No one can say anything after that. That was just such a good. That was a good. I think you summarized for all of us, for Jen, because yeah, it is the support that keeps us here is so important, financial and spiritual support, and this practice of gratitude. I think people can say a lot of things about Thanksgiving, the holiday in America. Um, celebrated with football and turkeys and all kinds of food. But one of the things, I don't know if you guys as families did this or not, but our family did, that you went around and said one thing that you're thankful for during the meal. And I just appreciated that because it just kind of grounded it and grounded the holiday to be like, okay, like, but we're here to talk about this. And I know other families do the same thing. Like with Christmas, they'll read the Christmas story or just to kind of remind what we are actually celebrating. And so yeah, I appreciate when we can go around and think about things to be grateful for. That was, um, oh man, Pastor Alessandro's gonna have to help me. Is it Philippians? Is it 2 or 4 where Paul talks about like not to worry, but in all things be thankful. Um,
Do
Not
not
be
be
anxious about
anxious.
anything.
yes,
Yeah,
do not be
Philippians
anxious.
4, 6,
4.
7.
That's it. That I was listening to something and they were explaining that actually chemically in our brain, when we're grateful, we can't be anxious. Like our brain just can't do both of those things at the same time. So,
That's good.
but anyways, we would be remiss to not talk about the holiday and kind of what how can we leverage, I mean, I guess not even just the holiday, but how can we leverage gratitude? How have you seen um, Thanksgiving in this time in the fall to be a method of reaching out in your community, of sharing the gospel in the community that you find yourself in?
Well, I
This is
think
where Hollywood is our friend in some ways, because the whole world knows about
mm,
Thanksgiving, because it's in our movies, it's in our culture, and that gets exported around the world. And it is a holiday that fascinates many people. So I haven't done this often, but we have celebrated Thanksgiving sometimes in France and inviting French friends and neighbors. And they're always very eager to participate, to have this, for them, exotic international experience of this meal. And it's very interesting. We can't do it on the actual Thanksgiving day. That's a work day here. So we have to do it on the Saturday after for people, or Sunday for people to be available. But we do this, and it's funny, they want to see like the whole big turkey brought out. Like that's the moment that Hollywood shows. And I don't know about you guys, but at our house, normally in the States, you cut the turkey in the kitchen and just put the platter out with the already cut turkey on it. But like our French people want to see the whole turkey coming to the table. So like we did the thing where David came out with the whole turkey and then, carved it, even though we would never do that at home. We just carve it up beforehand. And we do the thing where we say you have to go around the table and everybody has to say something for which they're thankful. And it's been a lovely experience the times we've done that. And I think there is, like you're saying, Jesse, whether people cognitively know they can't worry and be grateful at the same time, there's a deep sense of peace and the presence of God that settles around a table when gratitude is expressed. I also think it makes something real that we don't give a lot of voice to. I've heard it said that gratitude isn't gratitude unless it's spoken. Like, I can feel thankful for you guys, but if I don't say, hey, Jesse and Alessandro, I'm really thankful for being able to do this podcast with you, then that gratitude hasn't really reached its full peak. And we don't have a lot of spaces in our life where we make that opportunity explicit for people to express their gratitude. So it's a great excuse to do that.
Yeah. I as a church, we've never used Thanksgiving yet as an opportunity to um, make that space. But being from Sicily, I went there when we first moved here to Italy, and a missionary friend that's there was having missionaries come to do specifically that, go around and do events with around Thanksgiving to as an outreach. And so he asked if my dad has a house there, if he was willing, if they could come and I could invite my family members. And I did, and they came and they got to share the gospel. And it was just unbelievable. I can't gather my family members and share the gospel to them. And this was a great platform for that. But I also wanted to add the fact that strategically, a lot of it makes sense for missionaries to come because some of them, especially if you're working full time, you can have days off because of the Thanksgiving. But at the same time, you are sacrificing an opportunity to be with your family. So that to me was so touching that they came, the missionaries that did the event, they came here to do something not for themselves, but for others, while sacrificing their time off, sacrificing their Thanksgiving back home. To me, that was like, wow, that's awesome to see that commitment.
Yeah, I never thought of that way, but that is a really good, useful, practical thing. Is short-term people can come from the States during that time off that they get and bless the other missionaries and people. Yeah, when I was growing up in the North and was a new believer, the missionaries that were planning the church that I started going to, they did a Thanksgiving outreach, and man, it was huge. So the first time they did it, I don't know, there's, let's say 50 people came, a lot of Americans, but also some Italians.
Just remind people, Jesse, you grew up in Italy. So for people who are listening for the first time, this was happening in Italy, not in the States. Just want to make sure that's clear.
Yeah, so growing up in Italy, the missionaries that planted the church that I was saved in, they also did an outreach similar to what you were talking about, Alessandro, with Thanksgiving, and they would have Americans come and put on a big Thanksgiving meal, and it blew up. Like it started with, let's say, like 50 people, But then every year there would be more and more people that would want to come, and they just didn't have the space and the capacity. And it was in this small rural town in the north of Italy. And so they started like having to actually have a waiting list for the next year's Thanksgiving outreach. And on top of that, they would turn away Americans. So it ended up becoming like the only people that were there were like the people that cooked the food and the people like the missionaries serving. Like the Americans in the community around could not come to it anymore because it was just so, it was so impactful. And I can't tell you stats, but I know that there are quite a few people that came to know Jesus as a result of the gospel being preached through those. And they left a mark on me. I actually was kind of upset because I was like, oh, I can't go to a Thanksgiving dinner. Like I was too young in the faith to really understand that for them it was the sole purpose of evangelizing, not just hang out with other Americans. But we're trying. My family dynamic, we're not so much for putting on these big, huge, like 50 to 100 people, even though we had a church here that told us, they would love us to help them do that. We're doing more small things. So what we're leveraging, the movies and the fact that people have heard of it to gather like one or two couples in our home and say, hey, this is a Thanksgiving meal, and we do it really simple, like way scaled down than, the American version of it. And so it's been cool to see people interested, and it's been a great way to invite people that we meet in one context into a different context. So, for example, last year we did it with our teammates, and they invited someone that they go running with. So the husband invited his running partner, and then I invited one of my rugby teammates, and so they brought their spouses, and so the four couples got to have a Thanksgiving meal together, and it was so cool. As soon as they pulled out the turkey, the two Italian guys like jumped up and like, oh, this is just like the movies, and they're taking pictures and videos, and it was just small in a little apartment, but it was so cool to see the interest in it, and then to be able to say, we want to practice gratitude because of what God did, and then to explain that we're grateful for what God has done and the way He's provided for us and things like that. And so it was just a cool way to bridge in our faith with, a Hollywood American holiday interest that our friends have.
Wow.
Yeah.
Here, the turkeys are, at least the ones I've found, they're so small compared to the ones I used to see in the US. So I'm just picturing what you just said, where they were like, wow. And I'm just thinking of a little tiny turkey.
Okay. So
well, it is hard, actually. Yeah, I bet we all have a turkey store because they don't have turkeys fattened up in France for Thanksgiving because that's not a holiday here.
Exactly.
So I have to go to a butcher,
Me too.
order it ahead of time. They fatten one up specifically for you.
Yep.
You pay an arm and a leg for that very fresh turkey, which comes with its head on. Yeah.
So I will share you the brief version. So I spoke Italian obviously fluently when we moved back here, and during COVID we wanted to do a Thanksgiving. It was just us, so I asked specifically for the smallest turkey I could get, and I don't know where we went wrong in the communication. I still to this day don't know, but he got the biggest turkey. The butcher shop got the biggest turkey I've ever seen, to the point where I didn't know if it was going to fit in our oven. It was that massive, and he looked at me and he said, are you cooking that today? And I said, no, that's going to be next Thursday. And he said, well, where are you going to put it until next Thursday? And I said, exactly, I don't know. He's like, I'll just hang it in my freezer locker, and when you're ready to pick it up on Thursday, you come over and I'll bring it to you. It was humongous.
That is funny.
And it was during COVID, so we were all alone. We couldn't have anyone in our home. So it was,
turkey soup, turkey. Our first Thanksgiving in France, I ordered the turkey from the butcher, figured out we had to do that. And then we were having a bunch of people over from language school. So I ordered the appropriate amount for the number of people. And he asked me, do you want me to cook that? And I thought, well, no, I'll cook the turkey. Well, then same thing, went home, looked at my oven, went, there is no way that turkey is going in this oven. So I went back to him. I remember I had to go to my language school teacher and ask her, how do I say I changed my mind? Because I had to go back to the butcher and say, I changed my mind. I would like you to cook the turkey for me, because I realized it was going to be impossible.
Yeah, I imagine in France is similar to Italy, where the ovens are slightly smaller than the ones that we normally have in the US.
Yeah.
They're smaller, so that's why a turkey can't
Yeah.
fit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I will say everyone that I've ever introduced to Thanksgiving has always been really excited.
Mm-hmm.
And even if they don't like the taste of things, because maybe they're not used to that or something, they still like the experience of.
Yes.
And so it's a great point to gather people. And so we would encourage everybody to use. I even know people who aren't even Americans that leverage the American holiday of Thanksgiving to just gather their church together and to do a potluck or something, and it's a good time. But
Yeah,
for sure.
Hey, I want to thank everybody for tuning in to today's episode. We hope you enjoyed the ride and found it insightful. Your ministry is important, and we hope that you consider your time with us an investment in your work. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share the podcast with all your friends and family. And until next time, keep going wherever God leads.